Welcome to our channel. Let's begin the journey.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something I find absolutely fascinating, the thermal failsafe. Basically, these are the built-in physical brakes of a nuclear reactor. If you've ever wondered how the actual laws of nature step in to keep a reactor core stable, well, you're in exactly the right place.
So, let's just ask the big question right up front, right? What actually stops a runaway chain reaction if the mechanical control rods just fail completely? You know, long before we even think about giant concrete containments or fancy computer systems, real reactor safety comes down to the fundamental laws of thermodynamics and quantum mechanics. It's literally baked into the physics.
Here is how we're going to break it all down today. First, we'll cover the thermal failsafe concept, then we'll look at fuel temperature and Doppler broadening, move on to the moderator and coolant void coefficients, and finally, put it all together to see reactor stability in action.
All right, part 1, the thermal failsafe concept and reactivity feedback.
So what are we talking about here? Simply put, reactivity feedback is nature's self-correcting loop. As a reactor's power goes up, the temperature of the fuel and the coolant naturally rises. Well, those temperature bumps trigger physical changes. Stuff expands, densities shift, even microscopic cross-sections change. And those shifts directly alter how neutrons multiply. Physicists call this a transient, just a temporary shift in power. So it's this constant, dynamic dance between heat and nuclear physics.
Now, the really crucial thing to grasp is the direction of this feedback. In reactor physics, we measure neutron multiplication with the letter K. Think of K like the gas pedal in your car. If K is exactly 1, you're cruising at a steady, perfectly stable speed. The reactor is critical. But if a temperature rise adds positive reactivity, K creeps above 1, and that chain reaction starts accelerating. We absolutely don't want that. If the temperature goes up, we want it to add negative reactivity, dropping K below 1 to safely slow things down. Bottom line, for a stable reactor, we absolutely need negative reactivity feedback.
Which brings us to part 2. Fuel temperature and Doppler broadening. This is literally nature's fastest break. Because heat is generated directly inside the nuclear fuel, this is the very first feedback mechanism that kicks in. Take a look at these curves showing the Maxwell-Boltzmann distribution. As the fuel temperature heats up from 100 Kelvin to 400 Kelvin and beyond, see how the curve just flattens and widens out? That curve represents the speed of the atoms. As the fuel gets hotter, the target nuclei, specifically all that abundant uranium-238, start vibrating much faster with a huge spread of velocities. Think of it like trying to catch a tennis ball that's buzzing around crazily versus one that's just sitting perfectly still. That thermal motion totally changes the relative speed between the incoming neutrons and our target nuclei. And because of all that crazy vibration, the resonance capture cross-section, basically the target area for catching a neutron, completely changes its shape. You can see how that sharp, super narrow peak at the lower temperature, T1, just sort of smears out and gets really wide as the temperature spikes up to T3. The nuclei are vibrating at so many different speeds now that they can snatch up neutrons over a way broader range of energies. It's exactly like casting a much wider net. And the result here is absolutely huge. As the fuel heats up, that wider net means the uranium-238 starts gobbling up more neutrons without actually fissioning. This causes an immediate drop in what we call the resonance escape probability. Basically, fewer neutrons escape the trap to go cause the next generation of fissions, so the reaction is instantly starved. Boom! It's an immediate, unbiasable physical break on the reactor.
Okay, moving on to part 3, the moderator temperature coefficient, or what I like to call the density tug-of-war. So while the fuel reacts instantly, that heat eventually bleeds out into the surrounding coolant and moderator, and that triggers our second layer of defense. Now, the moderator's main gig is to slow down fast, highly energetic neutrons through elastic collisions. Picture a cue ball smashing into a billiard ball. The neutron bounces off a light hydrogen nucleus, transfers its energy, and slows down. Once they hit these slower thermal speeds, they're way more likely to cause fission in uranium-235. But here's the catch. Water is our common moderator, and water naturally expands as it heats up.
And this sets up a super fascinating physical tug-of-war. As the water heats up and expands, its density drops, meaning there are literally fewer water molecules in that exact same volume of space inside the core. Fewer molecules mean less effective moderation, so the neutrons have to travel further while slowing down, which shifts the whole neutron spectrum and increases the odds that they get snagged in those widened uranium-238 nets we just talked about. In typical pressurized light water reactors, this drop in moderation heavily outweighs everything else, giving us a strongly negative reactivity contribution. The hotter it gets, the harder it breaks.
All right, part 4, the coolant void coefficient. Basically, what happens when the coolant gets so hot it actually boils. This right here is where we see a massive engineering divide between different reactor types. In light water reactors, the water is playing double duty. It's both the coolant and the moderator. So, if it gets so incredibly hot that it boils into steam voids, well, you lose your moderation entirely. The chain reaction simply stops. The void coefficient is safely negative. But what about reactors that use different materials for cooling and moderating, like the heavy water CANDU or the graphite moderated RBMK? In those designs, losing the water coolant doesn't stop the moderation, but it does stop the coolant from absorbing extra neutrons. So, getting rid of the water actually increases reactivity, creating a positive void coefficient. To put that into historical perspective, the RBMK reactor at Chernobyl famously had a highly positive void coefficient of 4.7 beta. Beta is just a measurement of delayed neutron fractions, but practically speaking, it meant a massive, uncontrollable surge of runaway power was added the very second that cooling water boiled into steam. It's a stark reminder of how different core physics dictate completely different real-world safety behaviors.
Finally, part 5, reactor stability in action, looking at the power coefficient.
So how do all these moving parts, the fuel, the moderator, the steam voids, actually sum up in a running power plant? They all combine into one master metric, the total power coefficient. It accounts for fuel temp changes, moderator density shifts, the whole shebang. In modern pressurized water reactors, engineers design this total power coefficient to always be negative, which means any accidental bump in power automatically inserts negative reactivity, pulling the power right back down without a single human having to push a button. It is a completely passive, physics-driven safety net. You can actually see this in action on this graph. Follow the reactor's response to a sudden step change in positive reactivity. At first, there's a surge in power. But as that power rises, the fuel heats up, triggering that instantaneous Doppler broadening we covered. Then, the moderator heats up, dropping its density. Together, they slam on the brakes, inserting negative reactivity. Notice how the power curve just bends and gracefully flattens out? The reactor power stabilizes at a new, slightly higher level, entirely on its own, perfectly balancing out that initial spike.
So what does this all mean for us? It leaves us with a pretty profound thought. Long before we pour feet of thick concrete containment or wire up insanely complex control systems, is the ultimate failsafe actually written into the very laws of physics. By understanding and leveraging things like atomic vibrations and fluid density, we've figured out how to build machines that inherently want to shut themselves down when things get too hot. That, to me, is the absolute genius of reactivity feedback. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I really hope you walk away today with a deeper appreciation for the invisible physics keeping our world safely powered.
The view from here is breathtaking. Command, we are in position and ready for the next phase. If you liked the video, subscribe and comment the topic you want next. Thanks for watching, and stay unstoppable.